Right, welcome everybody. Everybody having a good conference? Yes. Good. Hopefully that's not going to change too much over the next 40 minutes or so. So welcome to this session that we've laughingly called Management-readable format. In Tobias's keynote at the start of the conference, he made a little reference to this module and talked about giving files to, I think he said less civilized people. But a lot of this stems from my experience of if you produce something in PowerShell and you transform it using Excel, it's better received by management. I had a freelance gig not very long ago where basically I presented some data very nicely about the second day that I was there, and this went around some really, really important people, and I made myself a reputation having done almost nothing apart from format some data. So that was why this term management-readable format came about. I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors. I think you've heard this thanks from all the presenters. I think we probably all know that we wouldn't be here without our sponsors. Certainly we wouldn't be here. And the quality of the event owes a lot to the sponsors. So if you get a chance to talk to them and say thank you, please make sure you do that. Quick bit of background to me. I'm James O'Neill. I've been doing PowerShell almost as long as I've had that avatar. You can tell from the Microsoft logo on my shirt in the avatar just how old the avatar is. And I've been doing PowerShell since the beginning. I now work as a freelance because I spend a lot of time with large fish. My company is named after a type of ray called a mobular. And I spend most of my life having to explain what a mobular is, so that wasn't a really good choice of name. Other contact details are on there. So, PowerShell and Excel then. Just a quick thing, since I mentioned how long I've been doing this. Who in the room is under the age of 32? You're all younger than PowerShell. I've literally been doing this since before you were born, which is frightening considering, you don't look that young, and I don't feel as old as I must be. But it's been around for a long time. And as soon as we got a new command line interface, we said, well, how can we start moving stuff into Excel, or at least I did. And I realized when I did that 30-year reference, back in 1991, with probably Excel version 2, might have been Excel version 3, I had Excel macros that went and screen scraped something from a mini computer system. So I've been pulling in data into Excel in various ways for a very, very long time. So simple things that we can do to get stuff out of PowerShell and into Excel. We save stuff as a CSV. CSV's associated with Excel by default normally, so we just double click it and away we go. Or we do start file name and away we go. We can paste data in, and we can do text to columns from the data menu in Excel. That's a pretty quick and easy way. And we can do it the reverse way as well. We can copy from Excel, including some headings. You can then say, get the clipboard, and translate that from CSV. Of course, it's not a CSV by default. It's tab separated when it comes from Excel, but you can tell convert from CSV, use tab as the delimiter, and then we've got data into Excel. Excel has had a COM model that we can manipulate, and that again goes back a number of years, and you can do that, but that's quite hard work. There is a little bit of that in the presentation, because it's the only way to do one thing that I wanted to do. And if you're a real masochist, you can use ODBC drivers to treat spreadsheet pages and sheets in a workbook as SQL tables. All of these need Excel, fairly obviously, and there are a lot of places where we run PowerShell, like servers, where installing Excel is not an option. So we need something else. And the solution to this came along in the form of a library called EP+. It's designed for working with XLS files, so it relies on being able to manipulate the XML that's inside one of those Office files. If you ever want to have a look, you can rename a Word file or an Excel file or a PowerPoint file to .zip. You can unzip it and you can go and look inside, and it's made up of a bunch of XML files. And so all EP Plus does is it manipulates what's inside there. That means no need for Excel, but because it's working with files, some things don't exist until you open that XLS file up inside Excel. So there are a few things that we'd like to be able to do with pivot tables, for example, which we can't automate because the pivot table doesn't exist while we're creating it. The pivot table only comes to life when we open the thing in Excel. All that Excel gets from EP Plus is a definition that says, put a pivot table here, and these are the parameters for the pivot table. And then Excel does the rest. There's a free-to-use and a chargeable version of this library. We're using the free version. It's got good coverage. It's reasonably reliable. It's certainly not perfect, because if it were, they wouldn't be able to do a chargeable version. But it's pretty good, I have to say, having worked with it for quite a long time. And a guy I've known for a long time, a guy called Doug Fink, originally created it, and the reason why the thing's called ImportExcel, he created it originally to do imports. I got involved because I wanted to do exports. That's most of what I'm going to talk about. Doug and I seem to have become what some people call a mutual admiration society. He's very good at crediting me for doing more work than I've actually done. I never forget that it's his baby, and that way we seem to get on absolutely fine. We've lost track of who wrote what in it. We think in very similar ways. So I look at bits of code and think, oh, Doug wrote that, and then I discover that I wrote it, and I suspect the other way around as well. So I first got involved with it half a dozen years ago, and we got really excited in 2018 when we got to 100,000 downloads. The current versions, you can see there are a few versions that have got over 100,000 downloads just for those versions. So it's quite successful in terms of the number of downloads. This is from a few days ago, but we've passed the 1.5 million downloads mark. So it's pretty popular. We can't work out where all those installs are going. Doug also jokes the number of people who've answered his request for donations suggests that most of these are being installed by bots, but that's another thing entirely. Wherever you can run PowerShell, you can run this. So it'll run in Cloud Shell. I run it in Azure DevOps pipelines. Basically, it's not tied to running on Windows or running where Excel is. I just want to stress that again. There is one particular feature that if you run on a non-Windows platform, you need to install another piece of software so that the module can calculate widths of columns or widths of pieces of text so that it can auto-size columns. That doesn't work out of the box on Linux, but it actually gives you a message saying, do this, and then you'll be able to auto-size columns. So the things that we typically do, use PowerShell to process some data that started in Excel, configuration information, either tracking it or giving people a form and saying, you complete this spreadsheet for me, I'll build you this infrastructure. And I've used that in multiple places. And lots of forms of get information using PowerShell, extend it, present it with Excel. And that doesn't just mean getting the data and using select object or measure object. It means we can stick Excel formulas in, and I'll show you how that happens. We can do charts and pivots and conditional formatting, merge spreadsheets, look at the differences between spreadsheets and things like that. Again, because of the nature of this, the imports and almost all exports work cell by cell. You'll see what the performance is like. I think the performance is pretty good, except for really, really huge cases. And the biggest cases, the exports do get slow. There are a few things you can do to work around that, but it has to work cell by cell because of the nature of the thing. The object model underneath Just to give you a quick illustration, if we open a package with one of the commands in the module that just talks to EP Plus and says, go on then, open this file, one of the things that we see inside the package is the workbook. If we look at the workbook, we can see that there's a collection of worksheets in it. If we look at a sheet, we can see quite a lot, and circled towards the just below halfway, you've got cells, and then we can look at the cells. So inside the module, we're working with all of this so that you don't have to. Okay? Every now and then, you need to go and do a little bit of this, but the idea is if EP Plus supports it, you can always open an existing file that's using a feature, see how it's done in EP Plus, and then then do it manually if we don't do it. But what I've found is just using the ImportExcel command covers pretty much 90% of things. The extra tools that we've got take it up to about 99%. It's only about 1%, and rounding allowed for. But it's only a very small proportion that needs digging around with the object model. So, I said I'm going to focus on export, so I'll talk about import first and get that out of the way. But in the simplest form, if you do ImportExcel and a file name, it says, okay, I'll read the first worksheet. I'll treat the top row as being column names, and then for each subsequent row, I'll create an object, and whatever names you've got at the top will become properties of that object. If the contents of the cell are a date, then you get a date object. If they're a text, you get a string object. If they're a Boolean, you get a Boolean, and otherwise you get a floating point number. Okay. The options that you have to specify for import tend to be, I don't want the first sheet, or my sheet doesn't start at row 1, or I've got bad column names, and we'll see some of those. There are also options for saying, I want certain fields to come through as strings. Don't bring them through as dates or real numbers. But generally, I don't want to start at cell A1 on the first sheet. So this is the kind of classic thing, very simple spreadsheet. We do ImportExcel, and that's what comes out. So lots and lots of variations on that, but the main uses are we're either pulling in parameters for something, and I've now got to the point of writing a lot of my other things so that every parameter will accept value from pipeline by property name. Because if I do that, I can then just pipe what's come from ImportExcel straight into the command. Okay, some of the stuff I've been working on recently, and some of the other screenshots in the slides are Octopus deploy, and I've written some commands for Octopus deploy, and they're literally designed so I can do ImportExcel file name pipe to add Octopus variable. I think was the one I was working with recently. And the other thing we do is we pull the data in and transform it. So yes, I was saying about Octopus. This is actually Octopus. This is I've anonymized the names of the services, but these are services at the actuarial firm where I'm working at the moment, and each service has an IP address for different environments. So you can see we've named them after fruits. In actual fact, they'd love the fact that I'm in Vienna this week because they name all their things after bakery products. Here we've renamed the services after fruits. The IP address for the load balancer for each of the environments is one of these IP addresses. So in my particular case, there we go, import Octopus variable set from XLS. That path, that's what the code looks like. I'm not going to dwell on the code, but you can see it's basically gone and got the Excel data. in the middle of the screen there, and it just pipes that data. It groups it first, and it just pipes it to something that's been geared up to do what I was saying before and use value from pipeline by property set throughout. So each of those columns becomes a parameter. I spent ages messing around with the circled things and the arrows, and then I forgot that I put them in the presentation. Just going a bit highbrow for a minute, I thought I'd chuck in a quote from Tolstoy. Tolstoy had this quote, and I think it's the beginning of Anna Karenina, about happy families are all the same, but miserable families are all miserable in different ways. And really that applies to imports and exports. Imports are all pretty much the same. Exports, there are a bazillion variations. Lots of different kinds of data that we get. Lots of different ways we want it to look when it goes out. Okay? The most basic form, and we'll see this in a couple of minutes, is same as import, but in reverse. We look at the first object and we look at its properties. Those properties become column headings. We then fill in those column headings for every subsequent object to make a row of data. To solve a problem where some of your objects are missing some properties and the first one doesn't have them all, there is this function whose name appears in there, update first object properties, which does what it says. You pipe the data through that, and then the first object ends up with the full set of properties. So that solves the problem of, and it's a problem we see with format table and various other things, of the first item defining how the other items are going to look. Now, I'm a great believer in making PowerShell functions simple and trying to do one job at a time. So I'm a little bit, Doug didn't put all these options in. I added quite a lot of these options. I can defend this as being the way to make it work, but it's not something that you design if you sat down and designed the thing from a clean sheet of paper. So over the next 4.5 hours, I'm going to go through each one of the... No, I'm not. I'm going to show you the highlights of this and some of the key things. There are options in here where I can't remember why they're in there, and one or two that I've never actually used, as you'll see from the sheer size of it. But the kind of things that we're going to produce with this will be, if I can get the slides to advance, come on. Classic things like we want the output from a PowerShell command. So this is Octopus deploy again. You can see, again, I've got my fruits in place of the client's real things. What we wanted to know is what version of software has gone into each environment. And were the deployment successful or not? Now, I make a lot of use of conditional formatting. If you're not familiar with conditional formatting in Excel, go away and learn it because it's super useful. But you can see here the failures stand out when we look at that. I don't need to do anything else other than just throw that across to other members of the team. They can see exactly what's happened with that. We do some screen scraping. This was actually broken, and I fixed this recently, so the newest version of this has been repaired. So we can basically say, get this HTML table from this web page, one or two other parameters to help locate the table on the page and skip rows, and send it to Excel. Obviously, the one from the university there is not in the right order. Does anybody recognise this order for the Excel sheet? Oh, I am disappointed. Anybody know Tom Lehrer? Okay. If you look up Tom Lehrer and the elements, he basically set the periodic table to music, and it starts off, there's antimony, arsenic, aluminum, selenium, and hydrogen and oxygen, and so on. But nobody recognised it, so there you go. Transforming data. Here's some data relating to football. I'm not a great football fan, but, and this is where I have to mess about with something that PowerPoint hasn't quite latched onto yet when you have two screens. The Premier League publish information in this sort of format. So that was the last week of the season, and you can see we've got the games and the teams and what the scores were and where they were played. And that comes in, and if we get that back up, it looks something like that as JSON. Okay, that's actually the other end of the season, but that's how it looks, and then we can transform it a bit more and get it to a more useful format, and then we can actually start thinking about how that looks from each team's point of view, and we can stick it in a spreadsheet and we can start doing things to kind of go, oh, who beat the people who ended up as champions, or this one is just actually producing the end of league table, okay, and that's only from the results. So that's doing that kind of transform. There's a lot more to it than just select and measure object and native PowerShell commands. One of the things that we can do is we can say we want to put an Excel formula into a property of the object. And there's another module called the PowerShell pivot module, which Doug started work on, and I've, again, gone and messed about with, which helps doing these sorts of transformations. But here's an example. So you can see in this particular one, this is the he says, yes, this is the table that's actually output by the thing that produced that last screenshot. And what we can do is we can use this thing get subtotal, which is part of this other module, and we can basically say produce subtotals on those. But the bit I'm hoping to get to is we can say we want to add properties where the property is a string that contains an Excel formula. So these ones rely on a feature in ImportExcel called auto name range. So what auto name range does is each column becomes a named range in Excel. So goals for example, becomes a column, and then you can refer to goals for in a formula. And this makes life really, really easy, because we then don't have to start calculating the row and column numbers for different cells. So that's transforming data. Comparing and merging data, again, I'm back with my environments. I wanted one that didn't quite look like this, but this was the data I had available. All the red cells are cells that have changed between the last time this analysis was done and when it was done last week. So you can see all the successes have stayed the same, but all the dates and versions have changed. So quite often we want to just do effectively a diff between two worksheets. So you can see here, these have changed, those have changed, and so on. And then we get to presenting data. So there's my football data, just arranged by result and by team. This was another bit of a screen scrape. This was downloads of ImportExcel, and this one I'll try and show you in the demo. This one is actually some data about photographs that I've got on my laptop. And it's broken down by which camera and which lens I use to take the photos with. Since we're showing charts, just a quick thing on this. Pivot charts are quite easy to do by comparison with ordinary charts. Doug added a number of examples for doing quick bar charts, column charts, line and pie charts. So you can basically run a command like that one, take the data, send it into column chart, and it will figure out what a simple data set should look like. Or you can create a chart definition and then do export with this chart definition. And again, there are some examples of that provided with the module, but I'm not going to show those during the demo. So, did I say demo? What we have here, if I just tidy this up, how many of you have got to use notebooks in Visual Studio Code so far? Very, very few. Really useful thing if you're using Visual Studio Code. Install this module called .NET Interactive, which needs you to install the .NET SDK. And then you can create a compound document that's basically got markdown text, bits of bits of PowerShell script, but you can also have C# or F# and other languages, but the .NET module deals with the .NET languages, and basically we can annotate the text and see the output of the commands. So I'm just going to start with a really simple command, show you what that looks like. In fact, I can probably make this text a bit bigger. I might even be able to make it a size bigger still and still have it fit on. So this first one here, if you're not familiar with what getNet adapter does, we'll see it appear here. So that's what getNet adapter looks like. Oh look, there's the football data again. And there's getNet adapter exported to Excel. Now, the first thing that you notice here is ImportExcel has exported absolutely everything. We didn't tell it we only want these fields, so it's exported all the fields there were. So let's get rid of that one, and we'll get rid of the football one as well. Don't save. And, oh, let me just run that again. You notice I didn't specify a file name. Okay, at the top you can see it's been randomly assigned a file name, and if I want to keep this afterwards, I need to save it somewhere sensible. All right, it's picked some other default options, and if I do the same thing again, this time I'm going to specify the path. So you can see there it's going to export Excel minus path, and this time it's going to do a select, so it doesn't do absolutely everything. So that's created the file, and I just need to start the file separately. So you can see there's a much more vanilla version. We didn't say format it as a table or highlight the top row or anything like that. We didn't even say auto size it. So now we've just got a minimal set of columns, but we've got a file name of our own choosing here. So we can make that a little bit better. So what we'll do for the next one is we'll tell it here, you can see we've said no number conversion on media type. So 802.3 has come through as a string, and Excel is now telling us, this looks like a string to me. This looks like a number to me. Do you want me to convert this back to being a decimal number or not? So we've specified that. We've said auto size it. Give me an automatic filter, so I can filter this just to networks that are up. Freeze the top row. Sometimes we want to freeze the left-hand column, and we put the top row in bold so it looks like a title. So it's already looking a little bit better. Don't save that. And for the next version, I've just added some conditional formatting. So this is going to be conditional formatting based on text. Look for the text up anywhere in there. If you see it, make the text green, background white, no pattern, and this time the command's got -show in it, so it will automatically open. Okay, so I don't know how good the contrast is on the screen there, but those are in green where they say up. So that's quite a helpful thing to do. These conditional format definitions, you can also say only apply to certain cells as well. So let's close that one. So the next thing to have a look at is, what if the data isn't nice PowerShell objects? So this one, we're actually going to say, get some data from, there's a really nice website called Cupcake Ipsum, and it does the lorem ipsum text, but it introduces names of cakes and sweets and so on into it, which is more fun than the normal thing. So I'm going to read 20 lines of that, and then I'm going to just repeatedly add a column to my spreadsheet. Okay, so here I'm just counting the number of columns, and I'm saying start this in a new column. Now, what the export function will do is it will look at that data and say, well, they're all strings, and it'll do the same if they're numbers. And it just goes, well, if they're just strings, you don't want the properties of a string, you just want me to output the strings. So we've got some data in there. I'm just going to make a couple of quick changes to this. It doesn't matter what changes I make, so I'm just going to make some changes to that. And I'm going to do another version. And show you... Oh, you idiot, James. We'll do that again, and we'll do it properly this time. And it does help if you close that. I'm getting ahead of myself here. So we'll fill down, we'll fill right, and we'll do save as Cupcake 2. There is a reason for doing this, which comes up at the end. Now, we can also append data in the interest... Oh no, I want to show you this as well, so I'm not going to cut this one in the interest of time. So this time, instead of putting them in separate columns, I'm going to append each one after the other. So now you can see I've got a very, very, very long, I've got 1,700 rows with one column in each. So we can append to the spreadsheet. Ooh. If I try and import that, we'll have it. Okay, what have you done now? Stop. Okay, I will skip that one. Yeah, I'm going to skip that one. In fact, if it doesn't want to stop, one of the problems that you do get with these notebooks is when there is a colossal amount of output, sometimes things just seem to want to hang. And I'm not sure if that's what I've done here. So what I'm going to do is just tell it, stop all the notebook kernels. And I'm just going to skip on to the next piece. Just looking at the time, I'm going to skip 2 pieces. So what I'm going to show you here, I wanted to use a bigger data set. On my machine, I have Adobe Lightroom. I've got about 5,000 pictures in Adobe Lightroom, and Adobe Lightroom uses a SQLite database, and I've just got a little function here that will get everything. Cancel. Now what are you doing? Right, we'll try that again. So this is just going to go and get 5,000 rows of data from a SQLite database. And all right. When this happens, it only happens when there are lots of people looking. So, what we're going to try and do is turn it off and on again. So, we will... I'm just going to clear this data as well, because that is just embarrassing. And what we're going to do is, I'm going to skip that one because I've wasted too much time. And what we're going to do is just go and get the data from the SQLite database that underpins Adobe Lightroom. So that went and got 5,000 rows, and it spat that out to Excel in half a dozen seconds. So the performance isn't too bad. Okay, you can see across here that we've got some things, because of the way I did that export, we've got some things that relate to database rows that we probably wouldn't normally want in the export because they're not part of the data. But I wanted to show you that as a sort of benchmark for how long that took. Now, what I can also do is I can say, make me a pivot table on that. So I can say, I can generate the one that you saw at the beginning, and we can say, count the number of dates on which a picture was taken, and do a pivot table by camera model and lens model. Give me a pivot chart of this sort, okay? And I've also said, use the exclude property option there, and make sure that taken is a date time. ImportExcel will look for strings that are numbers and strings that are URLs. It's not terribly keen on trying to convert strings that are dates, because we get a problem with, do we convert dates using invariant format, i.e. least significant in the middle, like they use in one country, or sensible formats like God intended and we use over here. So we basically say it's up to you to sort the dates out. But here's a version of that pivot table that was on the slides earlier on. That's the breakdown of my photos by camera, and if I scroll across here, you can see and by lens. So that's done quite a complicated operation with not an awful lot of PowerShell needed to do it. But when we're doing these large sets from SQL, one of the things that we can do is send the SQL data as a single operation. Okay, so this next one, I've said make the thing smaller by defining what the chart should look like and what the pivot table should look like. And we can see those in text form here. And then this time, I'm going to call this function send SQL data to Excel, and that will use that ODBC connection, DSN equals Lightroom, the SQL that I used earlier on, and those two definitions, and it'll create the same thing as before, but watch the speed. See that finished in half a second? Okay, that's done everything. And we can actually have a look and see the sheet goes from A1 to M 5,200 and something. And we can see other values in there. We can see what the cells look like and so on. So what I want to do with this is actually use that auto name range thing that I was showing before and translate some of the values that Adobe uses to things that are a bit more helpful to me as a photographer. So I'm going to add 2 new columns in this. So aperture value and shutter speed value are numbers as Adobe stores them. And then I'm going to add 2 columns. I'm going to do a little bit of number formatting on some other columns, make it a table, and save and open it. So now, come on Excel, there we go, there's the pivot table again. But if I go back to this page, you can see it's formatted as a table with stripes. This one's just in grey. These are now sortable, but where we had these rather odd things for aperture value and shutter speed, they've now become what photographers would recognise as aperture and shutter speed over here. So this is the formula that was being put in that column that was being added. So we can add columns. We can do lots and lots of things with formulas if we use auto name range. So there's some more stuff on that. I'm not going to show that one. I'm not going to show that one. Oh, we can also, I will show that one actually. This one is some data that we use as sample data quite a lot, Doug and I, and it's basically product sales by day and shop location. So we've got major cities in the UK, days of the week, and then we've got sales of different vegetables. And those numbers go across there, and you can see here's a really simple way of adding a formula. Okay, add together tomato plus cucumber plus lettuce plus asparagus plus potato and call that total. Okay, that's going to go in there. And I don't want to dwell on what this does because I'm actually making this available as a function for anybody who wants to download it as part of the module. And it should become available in the next couple of weeks. But what this bit does is it works out what a subtotals row would look like. And then it goes through and inserts. Oh, that's going to be interesting. I've just clicked that twice. Let's do that again. There's the data. This code is very much not idempotent. Right. So that's created the subtotals. This inserts rows where each value changes. And then the last little bit we can't do directly within ImportExcel. So this last little bit we actually do using the COM model. And what that's done is it's put outlining on. So that was the bit that the COM model did. And then in here, we can see here are the subtotal values for Friday. Okay, and those were just inserted as a PS custom object where each property said you're the subtotal that was worked out in the previous one. So that's the other way of doing formulas. Now the last little bit, and I am going to overrun by 30 seconds, but the last little bit, when I was messing around with that Cupcake Ipsum file, I wanted to make some changes, and the reason was for this very last one in the notebook. What are you talking about? I know what you're talking about. Because I restarted this, I'm not in the temp directory anymore. Just to make absolutely sure. So there we go, I'm now in the temp directory, and if I try that again, have I not got minus? Oh, well, I don't know what Excel has decided it's going to do with that. At this point, one usually ends up saying, shut down all versions of Excel. Don't. Ah, that's why. We'll try that one more time. And if this doesn't work, I'm going to stop anyway. There we go, it opens this time. So what that's done, all the changed rows are highlighted in green, and all the changed cells are highlighted in red. So when you say, export the configuration of this system as it is today, and compare it with the version I took last week, this will then just say, and here's how it's changed. That's not bad, as a kind of 2-second command. So that's it. And unlike what I usually do, I've only overrun by 2 minutes. This is the last session of the day, so have a good evening. Those of you who have questions, and I'm sure there will be 1 or 2, feel free to grab me afterwards. Otherwise, thank you very much. Enjoy your evening.